Hey there, it's Jon Fleischman with SoDoesItMatter.com, all about California politics. And we're very, very pleased that you're with us again for our weekly one-on-one podcast interview where we seek out somebody who matters to what's going on in California and talk to them about something that matters. And very, very pleased today to have as our special guest retired Superior Court Judge of California, Maryanne Gilliard. Maryanne, I don't know if you've seen any of our podcasts to know that our tradition is that we actually ask ChatGPT to put together an introduction for you, which you're going to hear in a moment. But what you folks who are watching this, two things. One, the way that you can help us and help the judge as she's getting some important messaging out is to make sure that you, depending on where you're seeing this, if you're on YouTube, we want you to like it. We want you to hit the subscribe button so you know what we're doing. If you're on Substack, hit the little heart button. You can stack this. That's their way of saying share it with others. Substackians. And then last but not least, obviously, you can take this and share it on email or however you want. We really appreciate it. So, Maryanne, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me, John. This
All
is
right.
quite a nice experience here this afternoon, I guess.
All right. So before I read this fancy introduction from ChatGPT, I did want to disclose to everybody who's watching the secret reality, which is that Maryanne and I have been family friends going back, oh my goodness, longer than many of you watching have been with us. And she's an absolutely wonderful person. You want her in your foxhole. She's somebody who has great values and has great taste in friends. I can tell you that because I'm her friend. Actually, she and her husband Dave have been in my life since 1988. Long time. Longer than she was on the bench, but here we go. Per ChatGPT, I do my radio voice. My guest today is retired Superior Court Judge Maryanne Gilliard, who spent decades working inside California's criminal justice system, first as a prosecutor and later as a judge in Sacramento. Over the course of that career, she handled serious criminal cases, worked closely with law enforcement, and ultimately presided from the bench, where she had the responsibility of applying the law and protecting the rights of victims, defendants, and the public. Because of that experience, she's seen California's criminal justice system from nearly every angle, how it works when it's doing its job, and how policy decisions coming out of Sacramento can change the way justice is delivered in our communities. Today, we are going to talk to her about her career in public service, what shaped her views about the role of the courts and the justice system, and what she has seen happen to criminal justice policy in California over the past several decades. Judge Gilliard, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for
That's
having
pretty good. Isn't that pretty good? All right. So with that, why don't we start by asking him maybe if there's a couple of things in your background. I could think of a couple that maybe ChatGPT didn't pick up, because I know you were a prosecutor and obviously you were a judge, but I feel like you had a little stint in government service in between being a prosecutor and a judge that might be of interest to people. So what were you doing in that time?
Well, indeed. In fact, some people say that the definition of a judge is a lawyer who knew a governor. And so between being a prosecutor and being a judge, I worked for the Governor Pete Wilson, which was a phenomenal opportunity and put forward some incredibly important reforms to the criminal justice system, much of all of which has been undone by the last two governors. But at the time, we were doing 3 strikes, 1 strike, Proposition 115. So for Pete Wilson, started at the Office of Criminal Justice Planning, was a deputy cabinet secretary at the Youth and Adult Correctional Agency. I had a stint at the lottery where I was the actual director there. And then I ended my career with the governor as a deputy cabinet secretary working in the Horseshoe. So for those of you who are watching this and know what that is, my office was right next door to the governor.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And for those people who don't know, the offices of the governor in the state capitol, I don't know what they look like after this big, serious multi-billion-dollar renovation of the capitol, but at the time that we were both last in the governor's offices, they're arranged in the shape of a horseshoe. So that's why they call it the horseshoe. It just kind of works out that way. I can tell you now, as we sit here in 2026, that I miss Pete Wilson, which is something, because at the time when he was the governor, I was a bit younger and more purist, and I thought, well, he's not that conservative. And now, in retrospect, as I have taken the time to tell both the governor and Mrs. Wilson, in retrospect, he looks like Attila the Hun.
Well, and truly, Pete Wilson was right about everything. He truly was. When you look
Yeah.
at it today, And what he was doing back in the day, he was right about everything.
Right. So
I'm a little biased in that I have tremendous respect and regard for Governor Wilson and Mrs. Wilson.
right. So okay, so let's hop into some Q&A right here, cuz our readers and watchers know that you spent a career on the bench, and they probably have figured out that if you and I are talking, you've got some perspective to share from your time on the bench. But why don't we start, before you tell what may be horror stories? Why don't we start out with your kind of jurisprudence and what your perspective is in terms of the core purpose of the criminal justice system, and how it's supposed to be working. That way we kind of establish a benchmark of what normal is supposed to be, so that then as we talk about some of the changes that are going on, we're comparing those changes to what you think normal should be.
So there are two ways to become a judge. One, you can be appointed by a governor, or two, you can run for election. The key, though, is that you have to have been a practicing attorney for 10 years. So I was the last judge appointed by Governor Wilson to the Sacramento County bench. And I would say virtually every Wilson appointee had the same perspective on being a judge. You can be an activist judge where you are very result oriented, or you can be what those of us who were appointed during the Wilson years, we saw ourselves, and I saw myself as an umpire. I called balls and strikes. I didn't care who was up at the plate. If that was the law, I followed the law. And John, the last several years of being on the bench, that was a pure misery because the law so drastically changed and we got so far removed from real justice. But so for me, I'm an originalist. I'm a textualist. I'm an umpire. I don't put my thumb on the scale of justice. I call them as I see them. And importantly, because I'm not a legislator, if I want to change the law, I can run for office and hope that I can get something through. I'm a judge. And so my role is to uphold whatever laws, good or bad, are enacted by the legislature and the governor and fulfill my roles. Key to this is that when you go to court, you should know what the rules are. And lawyers depend on judges knowing the law and following the law. More importantly, knowing and following it so that they can better advise their clients, be they the prosecutor or the defense. Hey, you're likely not to get this evidence in front of this jury for the following reasons. Or this judge is likely to admit your 27 prior convictions. So once lawyers know that you are a judge who, regardless of your personal opinion, will follow the law, they're able to advise their clients accordingly. And so again, I know you're a big Dodgers fan. What can I say? You sometimes boo the
You could say
umpires. Y'all boo
congratulations
the
for two
umpires.
back to you could say congratulations for 2 back-to-back world championships. And by the way, we're your world champions too, just so you know.
We were world champions, but we didn't buy, in fairness to the Giants, we didn't buy it. We earned it. But we don't need to go there. But in
That's
any
right. It's
event,
sure you didn't disclose to Governor Wilson at the time that you were a Giants fan, hence you managed to get appointed to the bench. But all right, let's move on. Sorry, you brought up baseball. My people watching this show know that I could do an entire podcast on baseball. So
absolutely. So
instead, we're
anyway,
going to talk
so
about hardball.
high inside, fast, hard balls.
Right.
So for me, being a judge,
So
I
so
was the umpire.
Right. So the challenge that you run into is you're an umpire, but what's happening is you're watching the rules of the game that you have to uphold get changed as you're sitting on the bench. And so because your job as you see it is to fairly and impartially administer the law, right? Suddenly you're forced to do things that maybe in your mind you don't get to say it in the courtroom. At the dinner table at home you could say, well, this is a dumb change in the law when that smock, well, I don't know what they call it, robe, that's it. When the robe goes on in the courtroom, all those personal opinions stay home at the dinner table and you just get to adjudicate the law. So what are some changes that that you saw in the law from the time you got appointed to now that I think it would be fair to say, and you obviously can have more opinions now that you're not, or public opinions. You've always had plenty of opinions, but now you can have more public opinions since you're a retired judge. It's my sense that your opinion is that the justice system is no longer keeping us as safe as it used to.
Well, what I like to tell people is that at this point in time, California needs to be placed under a conservatorship because the person in charge, Gavin Newsom, is a danger to others. Pure and simple. It started under Jerry Brown's, and then with Gavin Newsom, It was like he was on steroids to make it that much worse.
So unpack this for us. Walk us through some of the things that he is doing as a governor or things he's signing from the legislature as a governor that are helping you to reach this conclusion.
Well, I'm about ready to say something that's going to be shocking on this podcast. It's probably the first time it's ever been said, and I suspect it will be the last time it was ever said. But in fairness to Jerry Brown, he had federal court judges breathing down his neck when he was governor to release inmates because we had an overcrowding problem in our prisons. And so they told Jerry Brown that he needed to enact an elderly parole program. Again, to Jerry Brown's credit, he slow walked that for about 3 years. And then the legislature indeed passed a law and he signed it. And basically what that law said was if you've served 25 years in prison and you are 60 years old, you can be eligible for elder parole. Now,
It doesn't matter if you were sentenced up to life without parole. This would supersede that sentence.
No.
Or that's the wrong word.
2 instances where it didn't apply. If you were sentenced to death, which of course we don't have the death penalty, but there are still people on technically death row, and people that were sentenced to life without possibility of parole. So those are murderers where a special circumstance was found true by a jury. So an example of that would be you go into the convenience store, you're going to rob it, and you just decide for the heck of it, you're also just going to shoot everybody in the store. So now you've got a robbery, murder, special circumstance. You're eligible for life without possibility of parole or the death penalty, either one. Those two categories are excluded from elderly parole. But again, in fairness to Jerry Brown, he never let out a single one striker, meaning the most aggravated child rapists and serial rapists. He never let those people out. He did let out some murderers, no question about it. He let out people that were serving lengthy sentences, including 3 strikers, no question about it. But what he didn't do is what Gavin Newsom has done. To Gavin Newsom, 50 is the new 60. So Gavin took that 60-year-old elder parole and he dropped the age by a decade. So now in California,
say he did that, meaning that he had the legislature put a bill on his desk, or he was able to do that on his own?
He had the legislature put a bill on his desk, which he gladly signed and quickly signed. I know he's happy about it because he brags that he has shut down 4 prisons, and by the end of this year, he will have shut down 5. Those people are walking amongst us.
So to ask this question maybe this way based on what you've told me, so if before somebody's 25th birthday, they commit this heinous crime that has caused them to get a very, very long prison sentence, not one of the 2 that we described, not a death penalty, not a special circumstances lifetime imprisonment, but basically anybody else, and there's a lot in the anybody else, those people, when they hit 50, are automatically eligible to come up for parole.
I have an individual, I will never forget this case. It was the worst case I ever handled in my entire career, and I saw a lot of carnage. This man was 30 years old, and over a period of 3 days, he beat to death a 6-year-old developmentally disabled boy. And it all occurred on a Nest camera where you couldn't see what he was doing, but you could hear what he was doing. And then you could see the aftermath of what he did to this child. And from the moment that trial started with opening statements, the jury was crying, and they cried every single day. Now, I maxed him out. I gave him 25 years to life, but he will be eligible for elder parole in 20 years. And I suspect he will get out because I have seen a lot of murderers get parole. Now, the other thing Gavin Newsom did was parole for lifetime offense. So your murderers, they would be on parole for the rest of their life because they were given a 25-year to life, 50-year to life, 15-year to life.
Remind everybody, when you're on parole, that means you have a parole officer, you're being monitored, you have to check in, and there's more restrictions on you. You haven't had 100% of your freedom restored, correct? You still have obligations under parole that restrict your freedom a bit, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you need to let the parole agent know where you are. They need to have your current address. They need to know where you're working. They can show up at any time, day or night. They're permitted to search you and your car and do all kinds of things. So What happened was under Gavin Newsom, just follow along with this. So now 50 is the new 60 for Gavin. Then we go to no longer lifetime parole. Then we go to signing a bill put forward by Nancy Skinner from Berkeley that says if you are no longer on probation or parole and you are a convicted felon, you can now serve on a jury. So let me walk you through what happens under Gavin Newsom. Under the law that Gavin Newsom passed, or his friends in the legislature passed, his aiders and abettors in the legislature passed, and he signed. Let's take the person I just gave you the example of, the 30-year-old who just obliterated and destroyed and murdered this 6-year-old developmentally delayed child. He gets out on parole at the age of 50 because he's now elder parole. Now, he's too young for Denny's senior Grand Slam breakfast, but he is old enough to get out on elder parole. So now he's out on parole. And like I said, parole used to be for the rest of your life. Under Gavin Newsom and his friends in the legislature, parole, the maximum you can be on parole for a lifetime offense is 3 years. And you can be discharged after 1 year. So let's take this child killer who has gotten out at the age of 50. He's now on parole. And let's say the parole board decides, you know what, he's doing just fine. We no longer have to keep him on parole. So now he's discharged. Now, under the Nancy Skinner bill, felons can serve on juries provided they're no longer on probation or parole. So now that child murderer will get a summons and he too can serve as a juror. Now, here's an even better part of what Gavin Newsom and his friends in the legislature did. They actually came to the concept hit them that many times jurors are subjected to traumatic testimony, photographs, videos, which was a fact in that case that I was just telling you about.
Right.
The jurors were crying every day. They cried it during the trial. They cried the entire time. It was horrific. And so the governor signed a bill that the legislature sent him that
This may
said,
sound like a dumb question, but Judge, did you cry? I mean, how do
no,
you deal with it? Were you crying inside, but you're like, you have to have this kind of stoic judge-like appearance? Because I don't know you as a judge. I've not been in your courtroom, and you're a normal human being. Is it a mind? This is kind of interesting to me, so it might be interesting to read it. Is there a mindset that you put on those robes and you become this other person that has to simply be, non-emotional I mean, how do you do that?
well, since retiring, I'm on half the stomach medication and half the
Jeez.
blood pressure medication. So you internalize a lot because you cannot show emotion. You've got to be the impartial face of justice. But we are human. And
Right, of
so
course.
it does affect you. There's
Sorry,
no
it's
question
a
about it.
little
But
sidebar, but I just, I don't talk to that many retired judges,
well,
especially
I can tell you there are judges that do cry on the bench. There was a judge that cried on our bench after giving somebody 11 days in the county jail. Now, I would cry because I had to go to work and give somebody 11 days in county jail. Doesn't seem
you mean
much to cry about, but in any
you had
event,
some kind of progressive left-wing person who was crying because they were forced under the law to sentence somebody?
apparently he was quite distraught about having to send anybody to jail.
All right.
So
Well,
he actually cried during the sentencing. Be that as it may, so now this 50-year-old can serve on a jury. And as long as he's not on probation or parole, he can serve on a jury. So what I was
which is
getting to is
crazy
that,
because it's supposed to be a jury of your peers. And in what world is a convicted person like we just described my peer? They're not my peer. They're not your peer.
no, and they're dangerous on the jury because I'll tell you what the legislature sent to Gavin Newsom and he gladly signed. They realize that it is traumatic to serve as a juror, that you do hear horrible things. You see things that you cannot unsee. We're talking about child porn. You'd never unsee those images. And so they recognize this. And so Gavin Newsom signed into law a bill that said in cases where jurors are subjected to serious or violent felony cases, the courts are required to provide to them materials where they can seek out mental health resources. So I was given one of the brochures that the people in San Francisco, the Administrative Office of the Courts, also known now as the Judicial Council, they put together for judges to hand out. And I took one look at that brochure and I thought to myself, these people don't know what the law is, because one of the recommendations was, it's very difficult to serve on these types of juries. And many times it's often helpful to talk to the people that went through the experience with you. So you may like to provide to each other your contact information so that you can discuss these matters after the case is over. Well, what they aren't telling you is that the person seated in seat number 10 is a convicted stalker. He's just not on probation anymore. So now you're not just going to get one call from that stalker, you're going to get probably 150 calls a day from that stalker. Or you could have a convicted murderer or a domestic violence abuser.
So,
You could have a drug dealer. You could have a gang member. It's insane.
so help me out here because obviously you've talked about a change in the law, a couple changes in the law, and of course, there's been a host of others, ballot propositions that they've put on the ballot with false and misleading titles and summaries that have reclassified crimes to be nonviolent when they are violent. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but I'd be interested to hear what is their mindset. What do you think is their justification for doing this? I have my ideas, but I want to hear yours. What
John, as a judge for close to close to 27 years, I saw some of the most inexplicable human behavior. I think we can all understand the robbery that goes bad. We can understand a revenge gang shooting. We can understand how stupid it is for people to do drive-by shootings because they're mad at somebody and it kills a 2-year-old sitting in the living room. We can understand that. But what we're dealing with, especially Gavin Newsom, is an individual who I believe acts with reckless disregard. Now, that is a legal term, which means you know what you are doing is dangerous, but you do not care. I cannot for the life of me understand why anybody would release somebody like David Funston. David Funston was given 75 years to life back in the 90s for kidnapping, raping, forcible sex acts against children. And he kidnapped these kids. He was convicted of 16 counts, and he never thought he would ever see the light of day. And he shouldn't have. Under Jerry Brown, he would not have been released. Under this governor and his board of parole hearings, he got a release date. Now, thank God we have a district attorney in Placer County named Morgan Geyer, who had a case against Mr. Funston that they had dismissed in the interest of justice after he had been convicted in Sacramento County of all of these counts. Because the thought then, back in the 90s, was
He's
Funston's never
gone.
getting
He's in
out.
jail. He's in
So why?
behind bars the rest of his life. Why burn taxpayer funds and put these victims through the ringer again?
That's the number one reason you don't prosecute him for the Placer County cases. You don't want to take a child who was 5 years old at the time she was kidnapped and forcibly sexually abused. You don't want to put her. So they dismissed in the interest of justice. Now, Mr. Funston, 2 weeks ago, it would be 3 weeks, I guess, when we show this podcast, 3 weeks ago, he was released. However, thank God for District Attorney Morgan Geyer. He had an arrest warrant ready for him, and he was picked up by his own district attorney investigators, and he's now sitting in the Placer County jail. But what happened here? What happened was Mr. Funston is now 68, and he has served a little over 20 years. So it's time to get out. And you should see the most recent picture of Mr. Funston. He has the biggest smile on his face like he won the lottery. And he did. He won the lottery. We have another guy, Gregory Vogelsang. On the 18th of this month, the parole board has already said he should be released. Governor Newsom, who appointed these 21 people, I might add, they are his appointees. They're Senate confirmed, but they're his appointees. They're going to be meeting in an en banc, meaning all 21 of them are going to get the opportunity to decide whether Mr. Vogelsang should be released. Mr. Vogelsang was sentenced to 355 years to life under the Pete Wilson one-strike law. He should never be getting out. You should see the picture of this guy. He has got the biggest smile on his face because he thought, I'd never have an opportunity to molest another child, and here I go again. I'm going to get released. And he will, I have no doubt, if they're going to release Funston, they're going to release Vogelsang. Now, what do we do about this?
Now,
Well,
hold on a minute. Before we get to the what do we do about this, I want to, I just kind of want, it's the interesting case of Gavin Newsom, because the first thing I'll say is, while I don't agree with a lot of these leftists like Nancy Skinner of Berkeley and her ilk, I understand where they're coming from. I very much disagree with collectivism, but I understand their point of view is the people that you and I and the people watching this podcast would consider to be the criminals. These people actually see them as victims of society, right? Somehow these people aren't responsible for their own actions because society let them down and they were forced into a life of crime because of what A, B, or C. It's a bunch of crap. And I don't agree with it, but I understand the twisted logic, which really tells you when I don't understand where Gavin Newsom is. By the way, and that's atrocious logic, and it leads to a lot of people being hurt, and it eschews the entire American and Western civilization jurisprudence of individuals with agency get to make decisions and have to therefore be responsible for the decisions they make. That's the cornerstone of our criminal justice system, right? And these people don't agree with that. But Gavin Newsom, I mean, I'm so cynical about him. I don't think he actually has positions on anything. Therefore, I'm just concluding that he's been on this trajectory so long of trying to rise up through the ranks of liberal Democrats and progressives that he's kind of embraced their agenda for political purposes. That is an absolutely awful and horrible agenda. I know I'm doing my own riff in the middle of your podcast interview, Judge, but
It's kind of a filibuster.
it is. But all right,
I yield the floor back to
what do
you.
we do about this? How do we solve for this problem, Maryanne?
Well, first off, Gavin Newsom is lying to the public and to the voters of California when he tells us there's nothing I can do. They're a separate agency. I have no control over them. I'll tell you who had no control. The 4-year-old who was lured into David Funston's car because he had candy, or the 3-year-old who was lured into Mr. Funston's car because he was looking for a lost puppy, or the 5-year-old that Gregory Vogelsang molested and kidnapped and took to his home and took pictures of him while he was molesting him. Now, those children, they had no responsibility. They're innocent victims. Gavin Newsom is not an innocent victim. He's the arsonist who set the fire and is now complaining that there aren't enough resources for the fire department. So this is what Gavin Newsom can do. And we can't allow him to continue to lie about there's nothing I can do about this. He could do 3 things today. Number 1, he could fire the executive director of the Board of Prison Hearings. That would send a message. Number 2, his appointees, all 21 of them, he could demand their resignations. They don't have to resign. They can say, I'm not resigning, Governor. That's fine. Don't resign. But the biggest thing that he could do is he could call a special session of the legislature on criminal justice and fix what he broke. We know he knows what a special session is because he Trump-proofed California and gave the Attorney General $100 million to prosecute cases against the president. He's done special sessions on gas and oil. So we know he knows how to do that. He could impanel without any extra money being spent. The legislature's in action today. They'll be in action until they get a budget put together. So it doesn't cost any extra money. And they can waive referral to committees. They can put these bills on the floor.
We already
Assembly,
saw with
Senate,
Prop
and
50. We
pass
already
them.
saw with Prop 50. If these guys want to put something on the ballot, even they're able to waive every rule in the book, and they have a Supreme Court that will look the other way. They can do whatever literally do whatever they want, which could
They can do
certainly
whatever they
include.
want. So when Gavin Newsom says, I'm helpless, I can't do anything about that, it's a lie. And I'm calling him out today. It's a lie, Governor. Quit saying that. Just be honest. Just say, folks, I'm acting with reckless disregard. I'm the idiot who on New Year's Eve goes into my backyard and fires off 5 rounds to celebrate the new year, realizing what is going up is coming down. And people have been killed by knuckleheads that do that. Okay, Gavin, you know what you're doing is dangerous. All I'm asking you to do is care about it. Don't put the state of California under a conservatorship. I mean, when we're talking about where's the crime, what we need is the Highway Patrol to break out the yellow crime scene tape and wrap it around the entire building of the California legislature. Because with one signature, Gavin Newsom and his friends and aiders and abettors in the legislature, they destroyed one of the toughest laws in our nation against violent sexual predators. They did it with one signature.
It's absolutely terrible. I will tell you this. We're going to wrap up here in a moment, but it goes quick when you're doing an interview like this. But
We haven't even gotten to mental health diversion.
we haven't got. Well, you want to take a moment and talk about mental health diversion? Why don't you take a moment? I don't want to wrap us. Everyone will hang with us a couple more minutes because you've got a lot to say, and you're a first person witness to this monstrosity that's become the injustice system. Talk
Can
to
I
us
tell you
about
something?
talk to us
Behind the
about mental
scenes,
health diversion.
let me tell you, behind the scenes, John, I have friends in the criminal defense bar, friends that are prosecutors. To a person, they all think this elderly parole thing is out of control and ridiculous. We're talking about defense attorneys that think this. They think it is reckless and crazy and dangerous. Now, do I expect them to go to the legislature and say that? No. But I can tell you behind the scenes, this is a 90-10 issue. This is a 90-10. And the only thing I can consider is that 10%, those are the happy faces of the child molesters and rapists that are going to get out. They're the ones that are happy about this. I don't even think a Nancy Skinner, if she really sat back and thought about it, would think it was a smart idea to let out serial child rapists that were given 5 life terms to just let them out on the streets and let them do whatever they're going to do again. Because we
All
know
right.
they're
Well,
dangerous.
so Maryanne, give us your. I'm extending the podcast so that you can do a little bit here to talk about what's going on with diversion, because this rat is wrapped up in Prop 30.
So
So
Jerry Brown was the originator of mental health diversion. But again, in fairness to Jerry Brown, he had some guardrails that were put in place. Once Gavin Newsom became the governor, he blew away those guardrails. Under Jerry Brown, you had to prove that your mental disorder caused you to commit these criminal offenses. Under Gavin Newsom and his aiders and abettors in the legislature, he signed a bill that says if you have a mental disorder, it's presumed that's why you committed the crime. So let me give you an example. In Sacramento, there was a young man who one night dressed up in black hoodie, black mask, black gloves, and at 3:15 in the morning, he and 2 of his friends broke into 11 cars. Then about 3 weeks later, same drill, dressed up in black, broke into 13 more cars. So he was diagnosed with having post-traumatic stress disorder, from what I do not know, and depression. Now, I don't know about you, but the people that I know who are depressed, they don't want to get out of bed, let alone get out of bed, dress up in black at 3:15 in the morning and use hammers to break into cars. That is a pretty energetic, depressed person, right? So that person the judge denied mental health diversion, and that poor judge was reversed by the Court of Appeal because they were of the opinion that the presumption was not overcome. And so when you try to overcome a presumption that the mental illness, the depression, post-traumatic stress disorder was the cause, try to prove a negative. So there are exceptions to mental health diversion. You can't get mental health diversion if you're a murderer. You can get mental health diversion if you're an attempted murderer. I had a case where a boyfriend and a girlfriend had their 18-month-old in a kitchen where they were mixing up fentanyl. And by the time emergency personnel got there, this little 18-month-old had to be Narcaned 3 times on her way to the emergency room. Those people were going to get mental health diversion. But the best part of this story is that CPS gave Mother of the Year back custody of that child. So when I tell you that Jerry Brown was bad, Gavin Newsom was beyond bad. He's destroyed what was once a very solidly working criminal justice system. And this is what I just want to leave your audience with. Don't believe the numbers. Don't believe the statistics on crime going down. We have, as a society, we have what is called learned helplessness. And I can prove to you what that is. Learned helplessness is the domestic violence victim who doesn't call the cops anymore because nothing ever changes. Because when he gets out of jail, he still beats her. Learned helplessness
it's
is the
it's
child
this
molester.
it's the store owner that after 3 times calling the cops who come over and say there's nothing we could do, doesn't bother calling them anymore.
Correct. So I did jury trial after jury trial after jury. I have talked to thousands of people, and it is so common for someone to say, my house was broken into. Well, did you contact law enforcement? No. What are they going to do? My car was stolen. Did you make a report to law enforcement? No. What are they going to have to? What are they going to do? So as a society, we suffer from learned helplessness. And so you are not safe. Let's just be honest. I don't care what they tell you the murder rate is. You're not safe. Don't go partying after dark. It's not safe. And I don't just say this as a 65-year-old woman. I say this as a judge who saw 20-year-olds as victims of drive-by shootings where they were completely innocent. They were just going out with their friends. And so it is not safe out there. And Gavin Newsom has a lot to answer for. And he should be explaining why he has acted with reckless disregard and why California at this point in time should be placed under a conservatorship.
With that, we're going to conclude by me just reminding everybody that Gavin Newsom has a reputation already for not talking about the things he doesn't want to talk about. He doesn't want to talk about the homelessness crisis. He doesn't want to talk about the housing crisis. He doesn't want to talk about the fraud in insurance. He doesn't want to talk about the we have one more item, maybe the most dangerous one of all, that he will not want to talk about. As a matter of fact, he's just authorized a new $19 million advertising program for the state of California to talk about how great it is. He will not be talking about all of the murderers and dangerous people that he has let out on the street. But I'm not going to give you another chance to respond because we need to end this podcast. But again, the message that Maryanne Gilliard is sharing with everybody is an important one. Therefore, I want to encourage you to share this podcast. We will spread it far and wide. We have a very wide network, but if you know people that you think should see this, please be sure to share it with them. And I guess I would say this to you, Judge, as we close up. For almost 27 years of serving on the bench, many years as a prosecutor, thank you so much for giving so much of yourself to us, to the people, to the state of California. And we are so happy that you've been able to cut down on your drug intake of blood pressure medication and sleeping medication. And wish
No,
you
no smoking medication. It was just the blood pressure in the stomach.
there you
Everything
go.
else was working
So,
just great.
all right. Thank you very much.